Before we start, this is not a tutorial or how to or explain a video. There will be no screen sharing, no step-by-step walkthrough, and no attempt to show you how to build an expiration report without having a minor breakdown. This is simply my honest and slightly complicated relationship with a tool I have spent an unhealthy number of hours using. I started working properly in marketing analytics towards the end of 2020 at almost exactly the same time that Google turned its app and web property into what we now know as GA4. Since then, I've set it up, maintained it, broken it, fixed it, trained people to use it, and spent far too much time explaining why two reports that appear to show the same metric do not always show the same number. Like most people, I initially found GA4 confusing, frustrating, and at times genuinely unfinished. But then something quite annoying happened. I started to love it, not despite the complexity, but partly because of it. At the same time, I completely understand why that complexity has left a lot of regular marketers behind. My view now is that Google understood something very early. The data world was becoming much more complicated. Privacy was changing, cookies were becoming less reliable, user journeys were moving across devices and platforms. Businesses wanted more flexible event data, stronger activation, and greater access to their underlying information. Google knew the analytics platform of the future could not simply be universal analytics with a slightly nicer interface. I think Google was directionally right, but it made the journey far more painful than it needed to be. For context, I've now worked in marketing analytics for nearly 6 years. Before moving properly into analytics, I worked briefly in PPC advertising. That introduced me to campaign performance, conversion tracking, attribution, and the constant challenge of understanding whether marketing was actually producing results. Towards the end of 2020, I moved fully into analytics. This was either excellent timing or absolute terrible timing. GA4 had just become its own product, but Universal Analytics was still the platform almost every business relied on. Google recommended running the two platforms side by side, so that is exactly what we did. For the next few years, much of my work involved setting up, maintaining, and troubleshooting both UA and GA4. I was learning the familiar Universal Analytics approach while simultaneously learning a completely different event-based platform that was still changing underneath us. Reports moved, settings were renamed, features appeared and disappeared. A training video could become outdated shortly after it was recorded. Sometimes things simply did not work. You would open GA4 looking for something that had been easy to find in Universal Analytics and think, surely I'm missing something obvious. Then, 20 minutes later, you would discover that the report either did not exist, required customization, or needed to be recreated in explorations. Marketers had completely legitimate reasons to be frustrated. GA4 made many basic questions feel unnecessarily difficult. Someone might ask, what were our most popular organic landing pages? Which campaigns generated our leads? What did people search for on the website? These are not advanced data science questions, but answering them could require you to understand acquisition scopes, filters, event parameters, custom dimensions, or exploration reports. Universal Analytics was not perfect, but it often felt easier to find these simple questions. GA4 gave us greater flexibility, but it frequently required us to build the analysis before we could explore the data. Then there was the problem of numbers not appearing to match. You could see one number in a standard report, another in an exploration, another in Data Studio, and another in BigQuery. There may be valid technical explanations involving attribution, reporting identity, thresholding, sampling, model data, or approximated user counts, but try explaining all of that to a marketing manager who simply wants to know how many leads were generated last month. GA4 sometimes forces analysts to have very complicated conversations about questions stakeholders believe should have very simple answers. Expirations were another problem. They are genuinely powerful, but each technique has its own settings and limitations. You need to understand compatible dimensions and metrics, scopes, segments, filters, sampling, thresholding, and data retention. For most standard properties, detailed event data in expirations can only be retained for a maximum of 14 months. And expirations are not raw data. They are more flexible than standard reports, but they still part of the GA4 reporting environment. This left many marketers feeling that they needed to pass an analytics exam simply to build a report they previously found in the menu. One of the best examples of my changing relationships with GA4 is unassigned traffic and the dreaded not set. Technically, not set was not completely new. It existed in Universal Analytics as well, but was usually hidden in direct. GA4 essentially separated not set from direct, and so this unassigned channel started to become far more visible and disruptive in GA4 acquisition reporting. At the beginning, I reacted like most marketeers. I blamed GA4. I assumed it was another consequence of its strange attribution logic, modeling, or unfinished reporting. I would see unassigned and think, fantastic, GA4 has messed up the traffic again. But over time, I realized GA4 had not necessarily messed it up. In many cases, it was refusing to confidently categorize traffic when the information it received did not justify doing so. Not set and unassigned and direct are not the same thing, and GA4 was right to distinguish this. Direct means analytics has no UTMs or referral source for the session, but was clearly detected if the user used browser bookmarks or clicked untagged links. Not set within unassigned is the same, no UTMs or referral, but was evident it came from somewhere else, just GA4 didn't receive the info it should have received. That distinction is extremely useful. In Universal Analytics era, too much ambiguity could become hidden inside direct traffic, but no referral and no usable campaign information does not necessarily mean someone deliberately typed your website address into a browser. Unassigned and not set within can therefore act as a debugging mechanisms. When I audit a property and see a sudden increase, I investigate UTM, governance, consent implementation, tag sequencing, session identification, and cross-domain tracking. I used to see unassigned as evidence that GA4 was broken. Now I often see it as GA4 telling me that something in the measurement architecture may be broken. The smoke alarm is not necessarily the fire, as they say. My biggest mistake was treating GA4 as though it was supposed to be a newer version of Universal Analytics. I kept asking, how do I recreate this UA report? Where has this feature moved? Why does this metric not match what UA was saying? Eventually, I asked a different question. What is GA4 actually trying to become? That was when it started making more sense. GA4 is not simply a reporting interface. It is an event collection, audience, activation, and data platform. The interface is only one part of it. Universal Analytics came from a world focused largely on website page views, sessions, and cookies. The modern data world is more complicated. People move between websites and apps. They use multiple devices. They reject consent. Browsers restrict identifiers. Businesses want to combine behavioral data with advertising, CRM, product, and revenue information. They also want to build audiences and activate those audiences across advertising platforms. You cannot properly support that world with a platform designed entirely around traditional website analytics. GA4 moved to a flexible event-based model. Almost every meaningful interaction can become an event. with parameters providing additional context. That flexibility is powerful, but flexibility without a measurement plan quickly becomes chaos. You can create almost anything, which means you can also create an enormous amount of badly structured data. I enjoy that complexity because it gives me more freedom as an analyst. But most marketers do not want to learn about event scope, session scope, user scope, consent states, cardinality, or BigQuery schemas. They want to open a report and understand whether their marketing is working. That is where Google failed to find the right balance. The underlying measurement problem became more sophisticated, but Google did not make that sophistication easy enough for ordinary marketers to use. Privacy is one of the clearest examples of Google thinking ahead. Consent mode, server-side Google Tag Manager, and GA4 all appeared around the same period in the second half of 2020. When viewed together, the direction was clear. Google was preparing for a future where browser-based tracking would become less reliable, consent choices would affect data collection, and businesses would need more control over how data moved between their websites and marketing platforms. For years, many companies treated consent as a website design exercise. They believed that installing a cookie banner meant the work was finished. But a banner is only the visible interface. The difficult part is the engineering behind it. Which tags load before the user chooses? Does the consent default run before Google Tag Manager? Are signals updated correctly after someone responds? Do hard-coded scripts respect the same choice? Does the consent state remain consistent across subdomains? What happens to the session when consent changes? From March 2024, correct consent signals became especially important for retaining certain Google advertising and audience features for users in the EEA. But advanced consent mode is not plug and play. One missed implementation detail can fragment sessions, damage attribution, and create spikes in direct, unassigned, or that dreaded not set. I was an early adopter of advanced consent mode in 2021, and my implementation approach today is significantly better than it was back then. It took years to understand how the consent timings, tag sequencing, identity, and server-side processing interact. When a consent implementation damages attribution, that is not automatically evident that GA4 is a bad analytics platform. It often means advanced analytics now requires advanced implementation expertise. GA4 can only process the journey your implementation sends it. BigQuery was probably the feature that first made me genuinely excited about GA4. I had already used BigQuery to combine universal analytics and advertising platform data for dashboard reporting, but native universal analytics event level exports were only available to Analytics 360 customers. At the agency where I worked, we only had a small number of 360 clients, and sadly, I was not managing any of them. GA4 changed that by making BigQuery export available to standard properties. That was a major development. Smaller and mid-sized businesses could now store their granular analytics events in their own cloud environment, combining them with other data and define their own reporting logic. You can connect GA4 with advertising costs, CRM stages, customer records, and revenue. You can build faster dashboard tables. You can create custom attribution logic. You can investigate journeys at a level the interface cannot support. BigQuery is not automatically more accurate than the GA4 interface, as you need to be able to model the data correctly, as otherwise could even worsen the data accuracy. But BigQuery gives you more granularity, transparency, and control. For me, that is one of GA4's greatest strengths. Today, I genuinely enjoy working with GA4. I enjoy creating custom reports that make the interface useful for a specific business. I enjoy building fancy audiences and helping paid ads teams in activating them in tools like Google Ads. I enjoy training clients and seeing them become more confident using the platform. I enjoy BigQuery for dashboards, custom attribution, and deeper analysis that cannot be completed inside the interface. The complexity that originally frustrated me is now part of what makes GA4 interesting, but that does not mean it is perfect. Important settings are hidden across different areas. Reports can apply different logic without making the differences clear. Explorations remain too difficult to master. Thresholding, sampling, and retention limitations complicate analysis. Attribution becomes especially difficult when consent, cross-domain journeys, and redirects and missing campaign parameters are involved. GA4 also places enormous responsibility on the implementation. A default installation creates default quality insights, which is typically bad. GA4 has real problems, but it also gets blamed for problems caused by bad or lack of UTMs, broken consent, duplicate events, poor cross-domain tracking, and complete lack of measurement planning. Is another tool actually better then? This is also why I'm cautious when a smaller analytics software company says, GA4 is terrible, pay for us for something simpler. Could another platform have a cleaner interface? Absolutely. Could it be better for a specific product analytics, privacy, or data residency requirement? Definitely. But easier does not automatically mean more capable. We Are Not GA4 is a marketing proposition, not proof that the underlying product is superior. Some alternative platforms market directly around people's hatred of GA4, but they do not necessarily provide the same combination of event collection, Google Ads integration, audience activation within that, advanced consent mode measurement and modeling, and BigQuery access. For most marketing-led businesses I work with, I would find it difficult to recommend removing GA4 completely. There are legitimate exceptions, especially where strict privacy, data residency, or avoiding dependence on Google is a strategic priority. But the better answer for most businesses is usually implement GA4 properly, configure it for the organization, train the people using it, and add another specialist platform where there is a genuine additional requirement. Most businesses also rely on the Google ecosystem in some form. That may be organic search, Google Ads, YouTube, or other Google advertising products. GA4 audiences and events can support measurement and activation across that ecosystem. You do not necessarily have to use GA4 as your only analytics tool, but completely ignoring it can mean giving up valuable Google measurement and audience capabilities. My final verdict is that I think Google understood where analytics was heading before most businesses understood how complicated the data landscape was about to become. It knew measurement needed to become event-based. It knew privacy and consent would create gaps in observable data. It knew server-side infrastructure and first-party data would become more important. It knew businesses would need access to event-level data outside the reporting interface, in particular when the interface needed to be fast with all this data it needed to handle. Google did not execute the transition perfectly. The early platform felt unfinished. Basic reporting became unnecessarily difficult. The learning curve left many marketers behind. But I no longer believe that complexity means the underlying product is bad. GA4 is an advanced measurement and activation platform whose capabilities are often hidden behind a difficult reporting interface. GA4 is frequently treated as though it should be plug and play. Install the tag, open the reports, and expect perfect attribution. That is no longer how sophisticated marketing measurement works. It needs proper event planning, campaign governance, consent engineering, tag sequencing, report customization, and training. That is a lot, but we live in a more complicated data world than ever before. Google recognized that earlier than most of us did, including me. I started by blaming GA4 for unassigned traffic, not set attribution differences, and reports I did not understand. Over time, I realized some of those things were exposing weaknesses that Universal Analytics had allowed us to overlook. GA4 is not perfect. There are still parts of it that drives me mad, honestly. But when it is implemented properly and used by someone who understands what it is designed to do, I believe it remains one of the strongest marketing analytics platforms available to most businesses. After nearly 6 years of working with it, I can finally admit that I genuinely love GA4. Not because it is simple, because of what its complexity allows me to build. I just wish Google had done a better job of helping everyone else understand it.